All right, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, January 24th, Istio Combined Work Group meeting. First on the agenda, let's see, we have John
We do?
Wendell.
Yeah, that's me. Uh, Hi, everyone. So last year, just to give you a bit of context, last year we brought to the TLC the topic of adding a new operator into the Istio ecosystem organization, with the goal of having another or proper operator in-house, right? We from Red Hat, we developed a brand new operator to replace our old Maestro one. And this time we are more focusing on getting the upstream or getting the operator directly involved in upstream without having a fork or without having downstream modifications and all that stuff. So last year we brought this to the TLC. After some discussion, it was approved. And this week I went ahead and I asked for the repository creation. And then we were asked to show or to talk a little bit about this operator, show potential goals of it before we could proceed with the repository creation, right? So in this call, we have Daniel Green. We also have Marco Luksha. So they are the maintainers of this operator. So I will head to Marco or Daniel so they can give you a brief overview of what the current state of the operator is and potential goals.
Yeah, I can quickly explain where this whole thing is coming from. So at Red Hat, for our basically Istio distribution called OpenShift Service Mesh, we always had an operator that allowed you to install Istio or OpenShift Service Mesh. It's mostly the same thing, just with a different support lifecycle. And one of the early some of the early decisions we took when writing that operator, we were new to writing operators. The whole company was new to it, actually. We've learned a lot since. And on the way, we've made some decisions that sort of boxed us in. So our operator initially was working just with the Helm API. It was just a pass-through struct, basically, to Helm values. And at the time, we didn't like it because it didn't allow us to do sort of proper validation on the fields, and we didn't have any feedback to the user. They would just throw in YAML and hope that it works. We would just pass it on unchanged to Helm. So at some point, we came up with a V2 API that was basically an abstraction above the Helm API and mesh config, which I could, somebody's already screen sharing, but effectively what we ended up with was another configuration schema that was sort of similar to the Helm API, and it contains some things from mesh config, but it became really hard to maintain because Istio at the time was growing really fast, adding features left and right. And I mean, you know it because you know, for example, mesh config. Even within Istio mesh config or environment variables, there's a lot of sort of tech debt, a lot of settings that might need an overhaul. And we have all these features as well, but we wrap them into our own abstraction around the configuration, which made it even harder for us to maintain. So we ended up having to maintain this configuration schema without any benefit to the end user, because we weren't better at keeping it clean, to be honest. Because it was growing so fast that the initial structure was soon outdated, and we ended up having to add things where we didn't really think they belong, but we couldn't find a better spot, and so on. So that was basically the version 2 of OpenShift Service Mesh. And for version 3, we decided to do a complete reboot. Because another thing that we did in OpenShift Service Mesh was the operator was basically the piece of the architecture that made sure that Istio installs well on OpenShift, and it's out of the box compatible with OpenShift. And if you've worked with OpenShift, it has a few areas where it's a bit more restrictive than vanilla Kubernetes. So we had to implement a few things to make that work. At the time, there was actually from the team, we always wanted to contribute these changes upstream, but there was actually pushback from management at the time, and luckily we've overcome that. So you might have noticed that we've been recently pushing some changes that improve compatibility with OpenShift for Istio. So our goal is that upstream Istio runs fine on OpenShift, and you don't need any special software patches to make that work out of the box. And similarly for the operator, we still want to have an operator for V3, but we want to keep it as close to upstream as possible. And for us currently, that meant we rely heavily on the Helm API again. This time we took a different path. We basically import the field names and field types from the protobuf that we have in the Istio repository and generate a CRD from that. And that way we have schema validation, but we also have the Helm API. And we're currently sort of fine-tuning that. We don't want to copy the Istio operator API one-to-one because, yeah, I think there's also some tech debt in that. But it's been sort of, so it ended up being very similar because the Istio operator API obviously is also built around the Helm API. And we've identified basically the Helm API as the thing that's probably the most portable and stable and the easiest for us to stick close to upstream development. So when a new feature is implemented upstream, then there's usually some way to activate it from within the Helm API if it's required. And that means our operator then automatically supports it. So our new operator won't be about, supporting Istio on OpenShift. That's something that, as I said, we want to have out of the box. Upstream Istio should have best OpenShift support, and we will be working on that. Our operator will be focused around trying to be the best operator for Istio. So we will have a community version that installs the community images of Istio, and we'll have a product version that installs our product images that have, as I mentioned, a different support life cycle, but those will be mostly unchanged. So while we before even had some custom features in OpenShift Service Mesh, that is not going to happen anymore. We will do feature development only in the community. And for the operator, that means the operator will be focused around enabling things like revision-based upgrades, so Canary upgrades. It will support installing all the components like cTunnel, CNI, and so on. So supporting different architectures. And so generally being, trying just to be out of your way and helping you to run Istio and not being so focused on this product side of things. And Marco can give you a quick overview of what that actually means in practice. I think he has some slides that show, for example, how the upgrade works.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So we've discussed the operator a lot. So, and let's say from John Howard, we also got pointers like, why would you even need an operator if you can use Argo CD, right? So in light of that, our focus is mainly on the upgrades, to have declarative upgrades, fully automatic, actually, not just, so you can choose to either have to either update your workloads manually or have the operator restart them for you. So, but we also as you'll see, we also support 2 different strategies, both in place and revision based. So the current setup is like this. So users typically will create the Istio resource where they specify the version and the namespace and so on. This is a cluster scoped resource because we feel that's the correct way, because it deploys components into various different namespaces, right? Plus the Istio revision, which is basically owned by the Istio resource and gets created automatically by the Istio controller, is also, so an Istio revision is a cluster scoped concept, right? It's the revision names must be unique across the entire cluster. So with this and for this and other reasons like ownership, like owner references, we feel like it's more correct to have these 2 resources be cluster scoped. But yeah, so users create the Istio resource, specify the values. It's not shown here, but yeah, they can specify the values and similar things in the Istio resource. But this basically gets copied into the Istio revision resource, which represents one current revision of the control plane, right? So this part, the Istio revision part, is pretty simple. It's just basically rendering the Helm charts, and that's it, right? The major part of our operator is in the Istio controller, not in the Istio revision controller, where we actually implement the upgrade or update strategies. Yes. So yeah, you could have multiple Istio resources, of course, for multiple meshes, where an Istio resource might be associated with 2 or more Istio revisions at the same time, or just one, depending on the strategy and where you are in the life cycle. But yeah. So, and now let's focus on the updates. As I said, we basically allow we have two types of update strategies: the in place and the revision based, right? With the in place, it's what you would expect. The existing Istio revision resource gets updated, which means that the existing control plane gets updated in place, and that's it. With the revision based update strategy, the operator creates a new Istio revision resource, which deploys a new control plane, and then either the user or the operator then moves the workloads from the old revision to the new. And regardless whether you use the automatic or the manual approach, when there are no workloads referencing the old Istio revision, the old Istio revision gets deleted automatically. Yeah, so this is the strategy is one thing, and completely orthogonal to the strategy is whether you want to update workloads automatically or not, whether you want the operator to update them, right? We haven't implemented this, but we sort of know what we want to do about this. So now I want to just show you quickly how the two things work. But there's a question from Costin. Yeah, our users typically run the control plane in different namespaces, even multiple control planes, but this will now change with because we previously had proper multi-tenancy where we hacked into the informers within STOD so that it would not require cluster scope privileges and it would only see certain namespaces. So we are not, we won't have that feature in our OSSM 3.0, which is the new operator.
Yeah, that was my real question. Are you still pursuing multi-tenancy? And because you said it's cluster resource, but then at the same time, it seems like you are still supporting multi-tenancy or some sort, which was always dubious because it requires all kind of hacks and all kind of tooling. And everyone expect documentation, pretty much expect this on Istio system. So are you still taking the pain, or are you kind of moving towards more?
No, currently we are just moving to cluster scope control planes, and then we'll figure it out. I mean, if you guys, if the upstream community figures out multi-tenancy, if not, then we're gonna stick to probably just discovery selectors. And
thank you very much. That helps a lot.
Yeah, so that is also why having a cluster scoped resource makes sense, right? Yeah, previously
it makes perfect sense if you are going with single tenant. I mean, that was it was not clear. I mean, you have Istio system as an option, and also you have cluster scope. It was a bit, but anyways, thank you.
yes. Okay, so basically we call this the update strategy, but it's not. So we're probably going to rename the field to just strategy, because it doesn't update, it doesn't affect only the updates. It also affects installation, because there's something about the naming, right? So if you create an in-place, if you use the in-place strategy, you create an Istio resource with the name default or XYZ, then the Istio revision will have the same name, right? And this affects the actual name of the revision, the actual revision that you have to reference in the workloads, right? So to have the default revision, you actually have to name the resource default, right? To use the Istio injection label, for example. Otherwise, you have to use the revision. Yeah, so this is what one might expect, right? You create Istio, you get an Istio revision, you get the control plane, and then you reference the revision in your workloads. An in-place update, of course. For example, to move from 120.0 to 121, the user just bumps the version field, and the operator will then update the Istio revision resource. And then, depending on how you configure the automatic update of the workloads, you either have to change the so bump the pods yourself, or the operator will do that for you, right? So this just includes restarting the deployments and replica sets and whatnot. The revision-based strategy is much more involved, of course. During creation, so after you create the Istio resource with the revision-based strategy, the Istio revision that gets created contains in its name is the actual version, because of course to have two revisions, you have two revisions concurrently, you have to have different names for them. So the version gets appended to the name of the Istio resource. Yes, but so during the upgrade, let's see, same scenario as before, switch from 120.0 to 121, but this time the controller creates a new Istio revision, has a new name, the new control plane gets deployed, and then either the user changes this label manually, or the operator does that for them. And then, but regardless, as I said before, regardless whether the user does this manually or if the operator does it, as soon as there are no more workloads using a specific revision, then after some grace period, which is currently configurable, but we're not sure if it needs to be, the old Istio revision gets deleted. We have been thinking of not deleting the revision, but just disabling it, for example, to basically to get the history of the previous revisions, right? This is actually, I'm sure you've noticed that Istio is similar to the deployment object, whereas Istio revision is similar to the replica set object. It's basically the same behavior, right? With just some more caveats, because here we also have workloads, not just the control plane. Yeah, so after a while, the old revision gets deleted, and that's it. So this is the current approach. As I said, this is so the upgrades are the biggest feature of our operator currently. And the other thing is the cleanup of the actual API. As Daniel already mentioned, we try to clean up what's currently in the Istio operator CR, and that means we are not including any deprecated fields. We are thinking of sort of having the components and the values field merge into the same field somehow, because you configure the same thing within each, right? So the user now currently has to, in the Istio operator resource, the user has to know that if they want to configure Helm values, they have to do it through the values field, and then if they want to override some Kubernetes specific fields, they have to do it through the components field. It just doesn't make much sense to split the thing, right? To split a specific component into two different fields, right? Yes, go ahead.
How do you deal with gateways? I mean, there are 5 ways to install gateways.
Yes. Yeah. So for gateways, our current position is not to have them installed through the operator at all, to use Gateway API, because we know from upstream discussions and everything that they're not part of the control plane. So yes, currently we just say that you have to use Gateway API for that. So that means that
Or
we
gateway
don't even,
injection,
we don't even have the gateway components anywhere in the API. So
That's awesome. That's the best choice. Excellent. Thank you.
I'm really, excuse me, I'm really excited about this Istio revision CRD that you've got here. It's something that we've discussed adding quite a lot over the last year in Istio. There may be some ways that we can learn from one another in that and kind of share notes as far as what we've proposed. But over time, I'd love to hear what feedback you get from users about that API.
yeah. So we were also, since we're just talking about the Istio revision resource, so this is actually represents one deployment of Istio, one specific revision, right? We were also thinking, because the Istio resource itself and the Istio revision resource are pretty big, right? That you deploy multiple components through that particular resource. So we were also thinking whether these should be actually separate CRDs, one for each component, and then they could be namespaced, right? But it seems like, and in that case, we would probably have to have a revision resource where you would reference the revision, and yeah. So, but yeah, this is our current position, that this is the best approach. So we would like to hear your thoughts on this and whatever you want to comment on.
You mentioned components. There are only 2 components left if Ingress is out, which is Istio D and CNI/Z-tunnel. Are you how do you deal with the CNI Z-tunnel upgrade? Because that's not revision. It's kind of a mess. It's upgrade is not as easy as it sounds.
Yes. So with the CNI, one of our colleagues has a PR submitted where CNI
He's
would
here
start,
even.
where CNI would support revisions, but that's for the non-ambient use cases, right?
Yeah, even for not ambient, it's going to be a nightmare to support in. Yeah, okay. So you are not mixing it. So basically, it's a separate topic. I mean, your operator is not managing CNI upgrade, or because in the past I said that the safest strategy is to do roll, to cordon the node and treat it as update the kernel and the kubelet and everything at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of different control, different kind of stories than Istio revision upgrade.
Yeah. So currently we have a workaround, which was supposed to be temporary, where only the operator basically manages. Let's say you create multiple Istio resources, right, with different versions, and then the operator sort of decides which CNI, which version to use for the CNI, and manages this. But this would hopefully be a temporary solution. We need to find a way. So one idea is to extract CNI from the Istio resource, because it is a global thing, right? So it should not be configurable through the Istio resource, which isn't global, because you can have multiple Istios installed. So we're not quite sure about that. So with the comments on that Istio revision thing, PR, and with discussions, we would like to get to a good answer on how to approach this.
One more question, since there is silence. How do you deal with eventual backward incompatible changes that are happening? So, for example, when you move to ambient, there will be quite a bit, but even between minor revisions, there are some from time to time.
Are you talking about the API changes or?
Behavior changes. I mean, sometimes it's not safe. It's not, you cannot just restart the pods and it will work exactly the same between 120 and 121 or, not very often nowadays, but it still happens from time to like the validation of certificates, which,
Yes, that's something to be determined still, but since it depends on the actual revision or the version number, it would have to probably be implemented in the operator for each version.
So basically, you will have some hook that is that knows how to deal with different weirdness of the versions or apply some sort of transformations, or do you plan to do this kind of stuff, or you let user control the pace so they can do if they need to do manual changes based on release notes or other stuff, or you just
Currently,
don't?
we only create the new revision and the process. So the migrating of workloads is currently not automated because
Okay, that answers the
so
question.
that will be that's something we're actually investigating how we can make that possible. But touching user workloads is always tricky, and we also need to figure out what would be our tests to verify that actually everything is working and we can remove the old revision and migrate everything over. So this is still something we're figuring out. So until then, we're sort of doing a manual migration of workloads. So we do deploy the revisions for you, and once we detect that you have migrated all the workloads, we will also delete the old revision, but the actual migration is currently not done by the operator.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. I think Costin kind of touches what I was going to ask. So is your operator support multiple versions of Istio? If so, how many versions are you supporting?
Yes, so in the operator repository, where the source code is, we have a versions.yaml file where you basically define all the versions that the operator will support. So this allows us to basically define which versions each release of the operator supports. Every time we release it, we just update that YAML file and that's it. So yes, the operator will a specific version of the operator will support a specific set of versions, but it's not defined. We have not defined what that will be. It's open. It's because it doesn't matter much unless it requires any implementation changes in the operator itself.
Okay, thank you. Because right now, I think in Istio, it's only support the current version. That's why I was asking.
Yes, this is one big change in our operator, that it has to support multiple versions, because if it doesn't, then the whole operator doesn't make sense, because the upgrades themselves are the meat of the operator.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sounds good. Summit, I think you have a hand.
Yeah, I want to ask, are you guys running this in production? Like, have there been data on successful migrations that that are done using the operator? And curious about the scale.
No, this is still very much alpha, so we're not running this in production. I don't know, Marco. I've just come back from leave, so I don't know, Marco. Do you know if customers have already tried it? So we have a nightly build that you can install in OpenShift, but I don't know how many customers are using it, and I'm pretty sure nobody's using it in production yet, because we explicitly state that it's alpha status.
Yeah, we have some customers that were interested in trying it. I'm not sure if they're already doing so, but probably they will wait for what we call the tech preview release, where things are going to be much more stable, because currently everything is basically alpha still.
Thanks.
So I think there are out of questions. From my perspective, I don't have any objections. I think just so everyone is clear, they ask from the Red Hat team is to be able to host this on the Istio ecosystem repo as a project and see how that goes, right? So it's not asking this to be accepted into the Istio project. So just so everyone knows, we are in the midst of transition Istio ecosystem to be owned by the CNCF. Because for a while, I think Craig Box was saying, you know, we shouldn't accept any project in Istio ecosystem because of the ownership and the donation of the Istio is only for the Istio org, doesn't cover Istio ecosystem. So I will clarify that with Craig and the rest of the steering committee, just making sure we can continue to accept a new project into Istio ecosystem. If there's no objection on this group here. So does anyone have any objection with this plan? And then if there's no objection, I can follow up with the Red Hat team and give you guys an update maybe within a week time frame to let you guys know if we can create the repo in the ecosystem repo.
Sounds good, Lynn.
All right, thank you so much for taking the time to educate us on this interesting project and some of the future direction on the Red Hat side. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else on this topic? If not, let's move on to the next topic in the agenda. We have Zhonghu about configuration distribution state. Is he on the call?
I don't see Zhonghu on the call. I just realized he's from China. We probably should let him go first. Next time, if we see another, Chinese speaker on the agenda, but he's not on the call. I don't know if there's anybody else who can represent him, though.
I think John and I both have context on this ask. We've been working with Zhonghu on his PR, but I'm not sure that means that we represent him there. We've been pushing back on the PR.
Now, how about this? Let's postpone this to next week, and I will ping Zhonghu offline to make sure that he comes to this meeting.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
With that out of the way, do we have any other agenda?
Friendly reminder for all of our maintainers to vote in the CNCF TOC election. You should have received an email from Craig Box how to sign up. If you didn't and you want some help, feel free to ping me and I'll get you set up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mitch. I really, really appreciate everybody's help and support here. Really, thank you. Samit, do you have a hand?
Yeah, so the one thing I want to just talk about is I have a PR open and I wanted to just get a quick feedback from the community. Maybe this is not the time we can do it async, but just wanted to share that PR.
No, it's good. You please share the PR on the agenda, and we can tag the right folks to review.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you so much. Should we wrap this up, Mitch?
Sounds good to me. See you all in 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Sounds
thanks
good.
everybody. Bye.
Later. Bye-bye.